I just want to say how lucky you are that I'm here today, because at 10:15 yesterday morning, I was notified via email that I'd won the national lottery. I simply had to click on a link to get access to my multi-million pound winnings, and doing so, I was taken to an ethereum-code.com site where I was instructed that I needed to download a piece of software in order to get my winnings. I'm still waiting for them. I did indeed download the file, and strangely it wanted my Windows credentials, Outlook password, internet browser credentials as well. So I'm still waiting for the winnings. I thought it was interesting because if Nigerian 419 spammers are into cryptocurrencies, then it's certainly going to take off. What I wanted to do was sort of walk you through how we guide organizations to think about risks in traditional enterprise security space, which may or may not be applicable to the same risks in cryptocurrencies, but I'm guessing they're going to be. Give you some insight into the type of threat actors that are out there, and then how those actors are also using cryptocurrencies as a target or as a method of monetizing their criminality, or actually using it as a way to make their own infrastructure more resilient. And then look at the challenges we're facing as a security industry to really stop the bad guys from causing us harm. So when people think about risk, what's a risk to you in the crypto space, you will normally think of one thing. And the initial challenge we have with organizations is to get them to take a step back and actually think about the broader scope of risk, and who might be intent on challenging that or compromising them. Normally we can bucket risks into four areas. So the theft of intellectual property, or strategic intelligence, M&A information, for example. With GDPR coming along next year, there's been an awful lot of visibility into protected personal information or protected data. And then finally, the loss of operational capability. So when we sit down and talk to a board and really get them to think about the broader picture of risk, everyone will have at least one in each of those buckets. Then if we look at the UK from last year, some of the more significant and prominent threats was the IP of Dyson was stolen. Dyson have just announced they're going to go into the electric car space, so more intellectual property there. Lawyers and solicitors are consistently targeted because they have M&A information, they're storing policy information, they have insight into an awful lot of strategic data. It's never good if you're remembered as the Queen of Carnage, which was unfortunately the CEO of TalkTalk's handle, if you want, as a better term, from the data breach of last year. And then finally, ransomware caused operational loss to an awful lot of NHS trusts during the earlier months of this year. The reason for this is we have basically a flawed model when we consider our risk assessments. And there's always this aspect of probability. How likely is it someone's going to steal all our bitcoins? And if you ask 3 experts, you'll get 3 different answers, right? Because we have this static suggestion that it's a fixed probability. It's 1 in 2 million that you'll be struck by lightning. But if you go out with a 20-foot copper pole in a thunderstorm, the odds of being struck by lightning are greatly reduced. However, if you're not able to monitor for changes in risk, if you're not able to monitor for conditional changes, this fixed approach leads to inaccuracies and inappropriate measures of statements around control being given to regulatory authorities or even the board of an organization. And what happens is we manage risk with DLPI, which is denial, luck, prayer, and ignorance, in the absence of continuous vigilance and monitoring. An example of That is the statement that Leicester City was 5,000 to 1 to win the Premiership, one of the longest odds of all time and a highly unlikely event. This was true, but it was only on the first day of the season. As we went through the season and conditions kept improving for Leicester, they kept winning, they kept getting more points, it became more difficult for other teams to catch them, the odds changed. And at the end of the season, towards the end of the season, they were odds-on favourites. So the probability of that event changed as conditions changed. We can see the red line here relates to information security. So we are all encountering malware every single day. It doesn't mean you're going to get infected, but the probability is at a certain point in time an infection will occur. That infection doesn't mean that a compromise will occur. Not all infections lead to the loss of credentials or sensitive information or unauthorized access. Even if it does, that doesn't mean anyone's coming back to cause an incident, and then an incident doesn't necessarily translate into a breach. Right? So, but being able to monitor those conditions is the important thing to prevent, black swan events from occurring. We try to gauge it. We try to give organizations a benchmark, a metric, so they can have better measurement over cybersecurity. This is from Microsoft's Security Intelligence Report, and this is a measurement of their own enterprise customers in Europe, that on average, every 1,400 encounters with malware, either through web browser or through email, translate into an infection. Their best recorded guide or compliance is their own internal environment of 300,000 machines, where they're able to repel 7,000 encounters with malware before one Microsoft machine gets infected. Once an infection occurs, it doesn't necessarily translate that there is increased risk of loss of intellectual property or extended loss or exposure to unauthorized access. Only 1 in 10 of the types of threats that come into the environment have the capability to induce or incur incremental risk. So you can see here we've highlighted Trojans as being about 10% of the malware payloads that organizations encounter. If a Trojan is in place and it is leaking credentials and it is providing remote access to unauthorized parties, this is from the Verizon report. Only 1 in 32 incidents actually end up as a breach, right, where sensitive information has actually been disclosed. Now, if you put all of those ratios together, you end up with a probability of 1 in 448,000 of there being a significant cybersecurity breach. Once you know that number, you can use that as a baseline. All you need to know now is how many pieces of malware are you encountering. Right, because then you can plan and you can start hunting for the exposures in the internal environment. Clearly, organizations are failing to do that. We have GDPR coming along next year, next year, May. And this is a report by the Identity Theft Resource Center, and it records data breaches through time. You can see here, we're basically looking at 312 breaches for this time period. Now, we know this is only really the tip of the iceberg because scouring the dark markets and the dark web for data breaches, we find an awful lot more in terms of volume and quantity. This is a carding website set to the UK, and these are the full, so this is credit card information, name, address, date of birth, security question, and you can see basically on a daily basis through January just how many fresh dumps there were of this information. This continues through March again. So many more breaches are actually happening that are being recorded by various breach repositories. So here's a sort of a look into the various threat actors that have elements of cryptocurrencies in the way that they monetize. One of the very popular ones these days is clearly ransomware. This is a group, the Rainmaker Labs. They make a number of malicious tools, ranging from what we call cryptors, which is a way of taking a malicious application and making it appear brand new or undetectable by antivirus technologies. They also make two forms of malware. They make Philadelphia and Stampado, and they have a full development team, a development cycle. They market to their customers. This is their roadmap as we go through. So August the 23rd, we're going to add better detection, new encryption algorithms, more features into the ransomware product, just to make it more viable and to attract more customers. They have a promotional video that you can go and see on YouTube, and you can see how it interacts with the victim. They provide you a screenshot of the splash page. So if anyone's ever seen a ransomware splash page, they're all pretty similar. It says all of your files have been encrypted. To decrypt your files, you will need to buy the secret key from us. They then, in their user manual, go and show you how to enable the various features to create that splash page. So this is the Russian roulette feature. You enable it, delete one file after 6 hours. This is if you want to enable a more aggressive spreading of the ransomware payload. So you can enable a USB spread or network, so spread by file and print sharing. They're innovating in the ransomware market. They're creating bridges, which is a way of avoiding Tor. So they have their own proprietary inbuilt communication method to make it more simple for non-IT literate people to pay them money. And as we've seen, the varieties and families of ransomware are only increasing. It's become very profitable for them. The top earning ransomware families were Locky and Cerber. This is research by Google. You can see that roughly 16, 17 million US dollars in bitcoins were paid to those various families. And recently, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network found that of those payments, the high 90s, 90-something% went through one cryptocurrency exchange, BTCE, which they just fined 110 million. And one of their operators, Alexander Vinnick, 12 million for basically facilitating criminal payment methods. I can't really talk about ransomware without talking about WannaCry, which was very big news through the year, and how WannaCry came about. So the NSA had a bad year, basically. All of their hacking tools and exploits were disclosed and have been slowly leaked by a group called the Shadow Brokers, who clearly have irked the NSA somewhat, and are using Zcash in a method for monetizing and dumping out the exploits bit by bit to anyone that would buy them. What is surprising is that with all the might of the NSA, they're still unable to track or catch the shadow brokers. And this has been going on for over a year, which might lend credence to the anonymity power of the Zcash cryptocurrency. One of the exploits that was leaked by the shadow brokers and bought by other parties was an exploit known as Eternal Blue, which was a 0-day, which means no one had any prior knowledge to the exploit existing. And it basically allowed the attacker to move from machine to machine using Windows file and print sharing. What they moved from machine to machine was a ransomware payload known as WannaCry, which crippled the NHS, took out a lot of operational services, was believed to infect over 300,000 machines worldwide, but ultimately ended up with 120 transactions. So 120 payments of Bitcoin went into the WannaCry wallet. The perpetrators then have moved from Bitcoin into Monero to try and anonymize their stash of cryptocurrencies further to avoid detection. Eternal Blue has also been used in the NotPetya attack, which was largely on Ukrainian machines with a very, very poor payment method. It was basically a ruse to make it think it was a ransomware payload, when in fact it was just a destructive payload. And also, Eternal Blue was also used in a malicious advertising campaign prior to WannaCry, which actually helped secure a lot of computers against WannaCry, because this ADLCUS payload actually shut down file and print sharing after it got installed onto the machine, and was then used for basically mining Monero cryptocurrencies. Some security research, Semantic, other groups have attributed WannaCry to North Korea for the reasons that it could be seen by a rogue state or other body as a way of avoiding sanctions if they can actually bring in money in a cryptocurrency format. What's interesting is that they're using known, tried and tested security flaws in the targeting humans, and they're targeting software written by humans in the form of phishing attacks and diversified or dispersed malware. So we'll look very quickly at sort of phishing and how phishing is changing. Phishing has been very stable. There's a certain number of industries that get targeted a lot. This is an attack purporting to be the Solicitors Regulation Authority. And it says, we've received a complaint regarding your law practice. Please find the document attached. So a number of solicitors, lawyers are going to be socially engineered by this type of attack, open the document and become compromised. So the very established industries are familiar with this. Banks are by far the most phished vertical industry, and they have a number of defenses in place. What is interesting is the trend now to phish cryptocurrencies. Using old school techniques, but clearly going after, wallet and crypto credentials and identities. You'll notice here a spelling issue with blockchain. So it's blockchain. It's basically a typo attack. My Ether wallet, again, an L inserted into my Ether wallet, so lookalike domains. And again, another attack at hashing root. So this is really an uptick. We're seeing a shift away from traditional targets for phishing and more into cryptocurrencies. And of those sort of cryptocurrency attacks and breaches, very recently we've seen a few. This one, hackers steal 8.4 million, fourth highest in a month, is interesting in the fact that the CEO of that organization believed that they didn't know how the hackers did it, but 8.4 million was only a small number, so they're not going to bother investigating it. This was a vulnerability in a wallet, which essentially is a piece of software, and there's stats on how many bugs per 100 lines of code there is in any application. So there will tend to be always vulnerabilities. This one was a social engineering of the ICO website. They were tricked into revealing their usernames and password, which then led potential investors to basically put funds into wrong wallets. And this one is an attack, again, in a phishing sense. So it pretends to be the Enigma ICO. So you can see, this is a scam. The URL is fake. Do not send funds to any of the addresses or data. This was their alert on Twitter. Your ENG tokens are here is a scam. You can see the response down the bottom. Damn, I did click on a link and opened a page, but no more. Do you think I have a security risk now? And the advice is better make a thorough virus scan of your PC. Maybe you fetched a Trojan. Right? So not great advice. But again, these are known tactics, tools, and procedures by criminal groups that are now just targeting a new market, which is cryptocurrency. So that leads us into malware. some of the new types of malware that we've seen, what is being coined cryptojacking. So if you're familiar with exploit packs, you might have a vulnerability on your website. You might create a malicious page with an exploit on it, and you might search for fajita recipe on Google and get taken to a malicious website where previously they would try to compromise your machine and take over the device. Now, with cryptojacking, what they're doing is they're running JavaScript in your browser for the purposes of mining Monero coins for them. This is my blog, and I've got the script running on my blog, and it says, check your CPU usage, because it will spike at 100%. So now the theft of resources of unsuspecting consumers and fans and browsers are being used to mine cryptocurrencies. The Mitsubishi Motors site in the Ukraine was compromised, and the CoinHive miner site was placed on that. CBS Showtime had 2 sites compromised with Monero miner JavaScript, as was Cristiano Ronaldo's website. 60 million Twitter followers, an awful lot of traffic traveling to Ronaldo's website. He doesn't need the money, and it was placed there by unknown entities. There's a great tool on the internet called Census, which allows you to search for infrastructure elements of websites. So in searching for coinhive.com, we find that this domain 159something.com is now 1,859th on the Alexa top 1 million websites. What's interesting about that is it is a brand new website that now has 5.15 million visitors a month to. So this is a site that has been placed on advertising networks, carries with it the JavaScript mining tool, and there's, you can only say that this is being successful. There's 5.15 million CPUs are being subverted to mine Monero coins. So JavaScript is just one method that malware is being brought into the organization. We're seeing now a lot more malware diversity. And largely thanks to the US, who have had all of their tools leaked, basically. But this graph shows you how we start to encounter malware. So the blue line is executable files. So good old X's that run on Windows. You have to double-click them in some way to make them run. The gray line is documents, so Excel spreadsheets, PDFs. Typically, we'd associate the vector for that to be email as the way of encountering that. And then we're looking at in-memory, so things like JavaScript, things like PowerShell, other ways of putting a payload into the environment increasing in popularity, and that's because this particular vector is much harder to detect for traditional and also new enterprise security technologies. So it wasn't just NSA that had a bad year, also the CIA had their tools leaked as well. And the operational services group of the CIA made a strategic decision to move away from producing separate payloads as a way of infecting devices. This was their rationale. They're going to choose Windows PowerShell as the execution vector because it's installed by default and runs as trusted. Right? And when that happens, it's a much tougher job for a security device to make the correct decision. Of course, this has been used by many criminal groups now. There's always a transfer of knowledge, and it's now being used by many groups which go after personally identifiable information like credit cards. This is FazeBot, and this is the interface, and it's targeting point-of-sale machines. So you can see PowerShell installed, registry resident installs. This means there's no new files placed onto the device, so there's nothing for the security technology to check. It's just part of the existing infrastructure. What you're looking at is a live command and control server of infected POS point-of-sale devices. So you can see there's basically 181 point-of-sale devices compromised around the world, and 2,363 credit cards that have been harvested from this one botnet. It happens in real time. So you can see the log information, so new track data coming in 1 minute ago, 2 minutes ago, 5 minutes ago. So one of the point-of-sale machines was a coffee shop in Peppermint Grove in Perth, Western Australia, which is like billionaire's paradise. So you can only imagine the credit limits of the credit cards going through that coffee shop. Once they hit this back end, they then go through into the store, which is the iSwipe store, and you can see code names for the database dumps that are coming into the store. VR, 90%, means validity rate, 90%. Replace means if it doesn't work, it will replace that stolen card within 10 hours. So that's sort of the guarantee that you get. I wanted to see if there were any dark markets that have Gibraltarian credit cards on them. So there were a few. Trump's Dumps was one of them. And what I've done is I've put in all of the BIN numbers for the Gibraltarian banks, and you can see we've got a 480 BIN number that was taken in Panama for 3 cards. There was also, I included this one because they actually got the flag correct, which I thought was good. A different BIN number this time, Honey Money. You can see long expiry dates, so these are fresh cards basically. And also I include this one because it uses blockchain DNS. It's a .bazaar site, and so you can't take it down. There is no regulatory body that will shut down this domain. And again, it's a way that the bad guys have made their shops more resilient. This is not a statement that organizations have been compromised. This is simply saying that these cards belonging to these banks have been sniffed or harvested somewhere around the world. So the problem the security industry faces is that the bad guys know how to break it. We are now faced with 390,000 brand new payloads on a daily basis. The security industry is typically worked by trying to explicitly identify a threat, either by taking a file and giving it a hash, so a unique signature, or looking at particular bytes of the file. So I know at line 50, characters 78 is going to be the word WannaCry, and I can identify that as a malicious tool. With cryptography and hashing capabilities, the bad guys can now morph their payloads into many different forms, defeating the ability for signature engines to detect a threat in a timely manner. The bad guys call this FUD, right? And this means fully undetectable. Now, one of the threat actor groups that we track use a tool known as NJRAT, which is the favored tool of sort of Middle Eastern, North African threat actor groups. Here, they've taken their NJRAT payload, which provides them with full remote access, full control of the victim, and they've run it against 40 antivirus engines. 0 have detected this version. They will then use this. This will then come out via email, and they'll use it for the duration until some signatures exist for this version, and then they'll go through the same rehashing cryptographic procedure to come up with another payload of the same tool, and they'll use that. Of course, this is now why we're seeing the trend in artificial intelligence and machine learning being seen as a way to defeat the hashing or the polymorphic nature of malware. This is a slide from Sophos showing how they describe machine learning. It starts with a human feeding the system, and they've broken the classifiers down into vegetables and fruits. The machine, the intelligence, will then look at what defines a vegetable, look at what defines a fruit, and find answers so that you can make good or bad decisions. So when you put something unknown into the system, it can say, oh, this is a vegetable, or this is a fruit. Of course, it still relies on humans. So if you're going to put a tomato and identify it as a vegetable, you're going to pollute that data. Right? So the answers that you might not get at the end will be very clear, or at least erode the probability. Now, if the machine is truly to learn, it will work out that the human is in fact the weakest link and create a robot to kill the human. And we've all seen that film. So again, machine learning, artificial intelligence is only as good as the data fed into it, which is the moral of this story. So back to the Eastern European, Middle Eastern, North African threat groups. They've also brought something new to the market as well. They have created secondary after-sales markets or bazaars for the resale of victims, so that you don't have to be targeted by a threat actor that's interested in you. It's just you can go to a market and find victims of interest to you. They put these markets on social media, on the dark web, on anywhere where you might find a particular customer. They put up adverts, so this is their victim profiling. If they can, they'll switch on the webcam of their victims and allow potential buyers to come in and say, okay, I'll buy that one, I'll buy that one, and I'll buy that one. They provide further profiling. Here we can see that the filter has been set to Israel, and the attacker has gone into the hard drive of the various machines to get further data on the victim. And in this case, it was identified as the Israeli ambassador's daughter for Croatia. The avatar in this case was the one that was later used by ISIS in their social media. These type of threat groups have also morphed to cryptocurrencies. So now we have the identity Hazona, advertising Bitcoin wallets for the purposes of enabling mujahideen, giving them arms, technology, equipment. The hashtag on Twitter is Equipus. So, two things. We can learn from those organizations that have failed. If you look at all of the significant data breaches, you will see that what comes through the breach announcements and the subsequent information is that everyone adopts an abundance of caution. So my advice would be adopt that culture up front. If you are abundantly cautious in what you do, you will set the best posture for whatever involvement you have in internet security endeavors. The other thing relates to my earlier point about risk assessments. Probability is not fixed. It is always conditional, and you must have the ability to monitor changes in probabilities of bad things happening. So that's it. Thank you very much.